Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. So glad to have you here. I'm so excited about our content for tonight. I probably say this too much, but this really is one of my very favorite topics that we cover. Um, so we're going to just jump in because I want to have plenty of time to discuss this tonight. This is all about learning to be our own best allies. Okay. I want you to notice this comment on the side. You are the best resource that you have. And I'm just so excited to talk to you about this tonight because I think that one of the things that we have found in our practice is how essential the mind game is in all of this. I think many of you have probably realized that as well as you get into this journey, that so much of this is mental and emotional, and that's why we spend some time in these webinars really discussing the facts of nutrition and physical activity. And certainly you spend a lot more time in clinic with Dr. Shill talking about that, but so much of these webinars are based on really focusing on the mental and emotional aspects of major change and really exploring what our barriers are, as well as what some of those bridges to cross those barriers and achieve success are. So let's keep that in mind as we start tonight. This, I think, is fascinating research. We think somewhere between 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day. Now, you probably thought that it was a lot, but that is maybe more than, it was definitely more than what I would have expected. Now, think about that in this context. It's thought that approximately 75% of those 60 to 70,000 thoughts are negative. That's more than 45,000 negative thoughts per day. Now, certainly there's a scale, right? Some of us tend towards more positive thinking naturally. Some of us work really hard at positive thinking, and some of us tend to be more negative by nature. So there's a scale there, but on average, we're looking at 75% negative thoughts per day. And then think about this. 95% of those thoughts that we're having are repetitive thoughts, things that we think over and over and over again. So why is that significant? It shows us how easy it is for us to get caught in these negativity traps. So our brains are going to naturally tend toward repetition, and thought patterns become deeply ingrained in these repetitive patterns. Now, we've talked on these webinars before about this idea that our brains are like roadmaps. And just like any road, the more traffic goes through that road, the smoother that road becomes, right? If you go off-roading where no vehicle ever goes, it's going to be a lot bumpier. It's going to be a lot harder terrain to cross through. But even you think back to the idea of wagon trains, and people would follow in those tracks because little by little, the more those roads were traveled, the easier they became. And the same is true with our brains. So the first thing to note about that is that our brains are capable of relearning patterns. And then the second thing to know is that we need to expect that it's going to be difficult at first. Creating new pathways will be hard, but it will get easier the more we travel those roads. So let me just touch for a minute again on this idea of fight or flight. Now, if you haven't joined us for previous webinars, and if this is a new term to you, basically our brains will alarm or danger. Our body will allow our body to go into what we call fight or flight mode, where we're having high levels of adrenaline, high levels of cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And what that does is, in a dangerous situation, it allows us to react quickly and to move quickly, right? And so it's actually a very beneficial part of our hardwiring system. The problem is we tend to get stuck there. And when we're stuck there, then our brains are feeling like they're in a constant state of danger. And as crazy as that sounds, even the littlest things like our shopping lists and our never-ending to-do lists and our stress at work and all of those things can put added stress on our brain to the point where our brain is often just constantly firing off danger signals. And that can take a huge toll on our brain and our body. So we have to kind of be aware of that. I actually want to do a whole webinar at some point on how we kind of do a full nervous system reset. The reason that I haven't done that yet is I haven't really learned as much as I want to about it yet, but it's something that I've been learning a lot about. Part of this is learning to create new pathways in our brain, and part of it is learning to treat our body in a way that kind of calms our nerves down. And I think that that those hormones get into this negative cycle where our brain and our body are feedbacking to each other, and it's hard to break that cycle. So Today, we're going to focus on how the thoughts that we're thinking can help break that cycle. In a future webinar, we're going to talk about how to break that cycle in our bodies. And that's fascinating stuff as well. Okay, so negative thoughts, behaviors, and coping mechanisms are like credit cards. And I want you to think about some of your negative thought patterns, your negative behavior patterns, and some of the coping mechanisms that you use and how you use them like credit cards, right? Most of the things, let's just take an easy example of eating cookies when you're stressed, right? That is an immediate payoff, and it's not just emotional. Sugar is actually something that will release dopamine into your brain and cause a temporary reduction in your stress levels. That is why we reach for the sugars, because it's an actual chemical reaction happening in our brain. The problem is that it's a short-term payoff for a long-term result that we usually don't want. So think about that as we go through this tonight, how some of your maybe unhealthy coping mechanisms and thoughts and behavior patterns are short-term payoffs for long-term negative effects. All right, so let's back up for a second. And I want you to just take a second and think about someone in your life that's been very inspirational. I put here who's inspired you the most, but it really doesn't have to be the most. Sometimes that's a lot of pressure to think of right in the moment, right? But just who's the first person that comes to mind as a person that's really been inspirational to you in your life? And then I want you to think about that person for a minute. What about them is so inspirational to you? And then let's go a little further with that and think about how did they treat you? I'm guessing that someone who's been super inspirational in your life was not somebody who is super critical or judgmental or unkind, right? This is probably someone who was patient with you, who saw your best qualities, who lifted you when you were down or when you were struggling or when you were frustrated. This is someone who had a positive mental, emotional impact on your life. And then think about how you felt when you were around that person. And yes, Amy, I agree with you. I tell my kids that all the time. If my kids have a bad experience, for those of you watching on YouTube, Amy says, sometimes negative people are an inspiration of someone not to be. And I actually do use that with my own children all the time. If they come home and they're upset that someone was unkind to them, I will say to them, think about how this feels. And first of all, let it be their problem. This has nothing to do with you. But think about how you feel in this moment and use that as a way to decide never to treat other people that way, because you never want to be the reason that someone else feels that way. So actually, I agree with you. I think that is very true. Okay, so now we're thinking about this person that's been inspirational to us. Well, the thing is that that person may have had a fabulous impact on you, and yet they only could have their impact had limits. Because if you think now back to what we talked about with the amount of thoughts running through your head every day, there is no one person that can give you 70,000 pieces of feedback a day, even someone that you live with or work with closely, right? And so with that context, we have to understand and appreciate that we can be our own best ally or our own worst enemy. No one is going to have as much impact on our thinking patterns as we are. And that's why when we're struggling with our confidence, no amount of external validation is going to fix that. We have to fix it here first. Not that validation isn't wonderful, but no one can validate you at the speed of 70,000 negative thoughts a day. Think about that for a minute. Okay, so there's two pieces to this, right? If we're going to be our own ally or our own worst enemy, the messages that we send to ourselves is the first thing, and that happens in our own thoughts, right? And then secondly, which is often linked and often follows the messages of the thoughts that we send to ourselves, is the way that we treat our bodies and our brains. And that comes down to our actions and our behaviors. Again, most likely a result of the original thoughts, right? So think about how in that context we can better take care of ourselves, okay? So we're going to look at thoughts and behaviors again, and then add coping mechanisms to that. With our thoughts, we're looking to feed our mind, feed our confidence, feed our views of the world in healthy, positive ways, right? Our behaviors is how we feed our body with food and nourishment, and feed our soul with the things that we surround ourselves with, the influences that we surround ourselves with. And then our coping mechanisms, let's go back to that credit card analogy, right? Are we paying now or are we paying later? Are we self-building or are we self-destructing? And we're going to talk about self-sabotage here in a minute too. All right. So I think we can all agree that kindness matters, right? I wish I could do a deep dive into all of the thoughts that I have about kindness to others and kindness in the world and how important it is for us to practice kindness in any situation and teach it to our children and to those that we have influence over. The world needs so much more kindness, but that's a webinar for another day. Right now, we've got to think about how important it is for us to take that value and transfer it to ourselves, because most of us who believe in kindness to others are still pretty bad at being kind to ourselves. So first we start with awareness, okay? What percentage of your daily thoughts do you think are positive? Think about that for a minute. Do you think you're at 25%, or do you think that you are, lower than that? Are you talking kindly to yourself? How much are you beating yourself up? How much are you criticizing yourself and then punishing yourself for behaviors that you're not proud of? And how is it affecting your relationships? I think that most of us miss the fact that the way that we feel about ourselves and treat ourselves impacts the way that we treat people that are closest to us. If I am insecure about myself, I will lash out more at other people. I will make assumptions that aren't true. I will, if I'm critical of myself, I'm going to be critical of other people. So it really can affect more than just our own sense of self-worth, right? This last little point is so important. You will become what you think you will become. Self-fulfilling prophecies are a real thing. We're going to talk about that on the next slide, but let me just finish this thought here. You will accomplish what you think you will accomplish. So think about that with your weight loss goals, right? Do you believe that you can do this? And your success or your failure is what you decide it will be. It's really true. And that can be both empowering and discouraging. I hope that by the end of tonight, you're feeling empowered and not discouraged, because the bottom line here is that while it's difficult, you have ultimate control. All of these external factors can't do anything to touch you if you can get control here. And that should be exciting and empowering. Okay, so let's think about some ways that we can change those thought patterns in just really practical ways as we get started. First, let's start with our fight or flight response. And again, we're going to go deep dive into this another time. But the thing I keep hearing over and over again as I look more into this and learn more about this, and this sounds so cheesy and weird if you think about it too hard, but you have to start telling your brain that you're not in any danger and that you're safe. Isn't that strange when you're cooking dinner and you're overwhelmed, or when you're, overwhelmed about doing squats or whatever it is? We still have to train our brain to feel like we're not in danger and we're safe. And as crazy as that sounds, just try it. And the next time you feel overwhelmed by something that you know is silly, start sending that message to your brain and see how your body starts to relax. It really is quite remarkable. So start there, kind of start recognizing, I'm looking for lions and there's no lions here. I can relax, Next, address your confidence issues. If you listened to our webinar with Dr. Page a few weeks ago, and if you haven't, I hope you will. He had so many great insights to share. But we talked about this idea of self-affirming and then in the beginning to believe it. And I shared in that setting that one of the things that I have used as my mantra this summer, over the last year, there was just so much going on in our lives, building this business, 5 kids with lots of activities and lots of needs. And I didn't realize how much I was starting to tie my self-worth to external things and worrying about my kids succeeding in sports and in school and all of these things. And it was helpful for me over the summer to just cut everything off for a little while. We didn't do any sports this summer. We didn't do any music lessons. We didn't do any programs. We haven't done any school. And we've just given ourselves space to just kind of be and recover and relax. And so my mantra this summer has been to say to myself on a regular basis, I am enough, even if or when, and to learn to really internalize, first of all, to explore that. I made a list that was several pages long, and it has to be personal to you. You can't just say things that might affect other people's confidence. But for me, it was, I am enough, even when my house is a disaster and someone sees it that way. I mean, that sounds silly to some people, but for me, I realized I was putting way too much of myself into how clean my house looked to other people. And that's silly, right? When you say it out loud, it's so silly. But just write down the things, and I challenge you to do this too, that you realize you don't really believe. I'll be enough when I conquer this. I'll be enough when I do better at this, right? see if you can write those things down, read that statement, and really start to believe that. That's a huge and powerful tool to start to improve your confidence and your sense of self that's independent of any successes or failures that are external. And then something that's been powerful for me is looking down the road. I remember when I was a young 20s person and I was struggling with different things in my life. My early career was frightening and overwhelming, and my dating life at the time was frustrating, and I was feeling kind of down on myself at a certain point one day. And I went to a church meeting, and this woman, I think in her 60s, who had, just spoke with such poise and grace and confidence and faith and all of these things that I wanted to be. And I looked at her speaking and I thought, I can be that someday. And sometimes it sounds so silly, but sometimes even to this day, when I'm struggling with my own confidence, I remember that, and I look at someone similar who is what I'm aspiring to be, and I think I can be there. And sometimes just that, and it can be in anything, right? If you're looking at health goals, if you're looking at faith goals, if you're looking at any kind of aspirations, looking down the road to say, that's where I want to be, and that's who I can become. And then believing that you can get there, that's inspiring, I think, and helpful as you're moving forward with your goals. So look forward, look straight forward, and know that you can get there. Okay, so how does all this apply to weight loss? We've touched on this, but let's just review this really quickly. Think seriously about these questions for a minute and give yourself an honest answer. If you want to respond in the comments, that's great. If not, write it down in your webinar workbook. What do you tell yourself about your ability to lose the weight? I know that you're here because you want to. Are you telling yourself that you can? What do you tell yourself about your ability to keep the weight off? Maybe you feel confident that you can get the weight off because you've done it before, but you've never maintained it before. So do you tell yourself that you can do it, or are you telling yourself you probably can't? These are hard questions, aren't they? Because when you say them out loud or when you admit to them, that's pretty rough, right? You think, man, why am I doing this if I don't even believe that I can do it? But recognizing it is how we start to reframe. And we're going to talk about reframing next. What do you tell yourself about how much weight matters to your identity or your worth? Do you believe that your worth as a person, that you are enough, whether or not you ever lose this weight? Do you believe that? What do you tell yourself when you stop seeing progress? That's a tough one, isn't it? When you've been making all this progress and you're feeling great and you have all this momentum, and then suddenly for a week, the scale doesn't move and you're working so hard. That is so difficult. What do you tell yourself in those moments? This is never going to work. This isn't even worth it. Or are you saying, nope, this is just part of the process and I've got this and it's gonna happen again. And you know what? Probably most of us have a combination of this going on in our head, and that's okay. But again, recognizing the percentage can help us make a shift. What do you tell yourself when you make a mistake? And what do you tell yourself when you make an intentional choice to deviate from plan? Now, what if you go out to dinner with a friend? Do you give yourself permission to do that, or do you spend the next several days beating yourself up for that decision? These are powerful things to recognize about our thought patterns. Okay, so then once you realize what thoughts you're having, what are you doing about it? And this is where we talked before about our thoughts and then leading to our behaviors. Okay, so the thoughts send messages of failure, but then what follows is self-sabotaging behaviors. And it's funny because our subconscious tells us that if we punish ourselves enough, then we'll somehow make up for that, right? We think that tying our identity up in body image or punishing ourselves for the mistakes or mishaps that we make will somehow provide motivation for us to do better. It's like the same thing as punishing a child to motivate them to behave better. I'll tell you, in my house, that does not work very well. It usually makes the behavior worse. And the same is true for us. So the less our identity and self-worth are tied to setbacks and our body image, right, the more success we'll have in making changes, because our energy is not wasted in trying to rationalize, punish, self-sabotage, all of those things. All of that energy can go to moving forward. Isn't that great? Okay, so let's look at what that looks like. Amy, you mentioned this earlier, and I love this thought. Talk to yourself the way that you would to a child or to your best friend. We would never talk to people we care about the way we talk to ourselves, right? I know with my kids, when they make mistakes, I had a sweet, no, don't get me wrong, I get angry at my kids plenty, but I had a sweet experience this week with my 10-year-old who came running upstairs to find me a couple of days ago and immediately burst into tears and was just so ashamed because he'd been throwing the football in our front room and broke my chandelier. And and he knows that he's not supposed to throw the football in the house. We've had that conversation 10 million times. But, he felt badly about it and I could see that. And so, of course, I just gave him a big hug and I said, I'm so proud of you. You didn't have to come and tell me that. You came immediately and you told the truth. And that shows character. And I'm really proud of you for that. And so we can talk to ourselves the same way we would talk to a child who was feeling remorseful and coming to us for forgiveness. We can say the same thing to ourselves when we make a mistake. I'm proud of you because you did this and this and this well, and you're going to do this better next time. I love this idea. You can write in your webinar workbooks now or at the end. Think of what your best qualities are and list 5. I'm not going to take time to let you do that now because we've done this in previous webinars, but I do want you to do this at the end of the webinar if you haven't done it already. And then add to that 5 things that you actually appreciate about your own body. Again, we've done this before, but this is such a great exercise to keep doing. It's going to be hard the first few times you do it, especially if you're someone in the habit of punishing yourself, right? You're going to really have to struggle to think, what do I appreciate or love about my own body? But the more you do that, the more that separates your self-worth from your body image. And then you can start to make progress. Okay, a little bit more about practicing positive self-talk. Think for a second about your last setback or mistake. And let's just make this practical here. What did you tell yourself? See if you can put it into words. I'm going to just give you a second to think about that, actually. I'm going to put this slide up and give you just a minute. And as you think about that, think about how you can reframe that phrase to encourage and not punish yourself. And if you can't think of anything yet, don't worry. We're going to give you an example on the next slide. But I just want you to start thinking about that so that as we talk about this, as we continue to talk about this, you can start to come up with new ideas for yourself. Starting with a personal example will help you as we continue through this. As you're thinking through this, I think it's important that we recognize we don't want to be fake here, even with ourselves. We want to say something that we really believe or think that we should believe. Maybe you don't believe it yet, but if you know that it should be true for you, does that make sense? Don't say something that's not true because that doesn't help. But for example, me saying I am enough even if my house isn't clean. Well, I can stop and say, "Woo, yikes, I don't actually believe that yet." But I know it's actually true. So now I need to take this true statement and convince my brain to believe it, right? Again, remember we're creating new pathways. So reframing, if this is a new skill for you, first of all, it's a skill, right? If this is not a skill you have yet, A, you can develop it. B, it will be an uphill battle at first, and that's okay. Recognizing that and accepting that will help you move through that tricky part in the beginning when your brain is learning a new skill. Okay, so we're going to talk about challenging those negative thoughts now. The first thing is being aware of them. We've talked a lot about that. Second is learning to challenge them. And this is where we talk about reframing. It was only a few years ago that I really learned the concept of reframing from a good friend of mine who is a therapist. And I'm hoping to bring her on this month as our guest expert because she was the first one that ever taught me how to do this. And the first time I heard this, it sounds so silly now because I've thought so much about it and learned so much about it over the last 5 years that now it seems like just a common part of my language. But this was very foreign and new to me about 5 years ago, is this idea that we could take a thought and reframe it, just change the thought into something that was more productive and positive. Our negative thoughts are distorted and not based in reality. And so watch for things in your thought patterns like never and always. That's distortion, right? All of us have different unique perceptions and beliefs about the world around us. That's what makes communicating and relating to others so difficult sometimes. But the more that we can learn to reframe our thoughts in a positive and realistic way, the more power that we have to make changes and to live a more fulfilling life. So just again, remember that if you repeat things enough, your brain will accept it. You can actually train your brain. You can actually tell your brain how to think, and that is so cool. You control your brain, not the other way around, even though it feels like it. That's sometimes. Okay. So again, here's an example of reframing, and who can relate to this one? I know I can, probably more recently than I care to admit, right? I didn't eat one cookie, I ate 6. I am terrible at this. I will never get the weight off because I have no self-control. Okay, did you hear the word never there? And then think about that. Do you see how that just became a self-fulfilling prophecy? If you're sending that message to yourself, then what's going to stop you from eating another 6 cookies tomorrow? I can't do it. I have no self-control. I'm never going to succeed. Why not just eat another 6 cookies? Because that looks good and it's easier, and I don't even know why I'm trying. So those thoughts then lead to more behaviors that you feel more ashamed about, and then the cycle goes onward, right? So if I have that thought, first of all, those thoughts are going to pop into your head, right? That's especially if you're not in the habit of doing this at first. Okay, so first of all, don't feel any shame that that thought was there, but challenge it. Wait, do I really have no self-control? How many times today or this week have I exercised self-control? How many times did I say no to the cookies before that moment? Okay, what was going on that led me to make that choice? Did I just have a fight with somebody? I'm feeling overwhelmed. Did I have a bad day at work? Okay, so that was and I think this is tricky too, right? Because we have to find the balance between giving ourselves grace and not justifying our decisions. It's okay to say I made a mistake, not, oh well, I had to do it because I had a bad day at work. Because then every time you have a bad day at work, the cycle continues. You can say, okay, this was a rough day. I made a mistake because of that. Therefore, now I recognize that mistake. I also recognize all my successes this week, and now I have the power to move forward in a more productive way. Right? Here's another affirmation. I've been working really hard at this lately and have gained a lot more self-awareness. So it's been a long time since I made a choice like that. And next time I can probably go even longer before I make a choice like that. Right? You see how much more how that's self-fulfilling on the other direction. Right? Okay. Practicing self-affirmations. We're going to kind of breeze through this so we can keep moving. But let's just think about the word affirmation for a minute. If you've done any kind of meditation videos or audio tracks, first of all, I totally recommend it. This is another thing that I've probably discovered in the last 5 to 10 years that I used to think was just totally out to lunch and have now become a big believer in. But let me just start with that by saying that one thing that I have really recognized in myself is that if I want to change the way I'm thinking, I have to really be selective about what I'm watching, listening to, and surrounding myself with. If I'm scrolling through social media and spending a lot of my time doing that, my thought cycles become more negative. They become, it doesn't do a lot for my mind. I'm not growing. I'm not learning a lot. And contrastingly, if I'm listening to things on parenting or things on faith or things on self-awareness or self-improvement or meditation, then suddenly the way I'm approaching my day changes, because what I'm hearing in my head externally is going to affect what I'm hearing in my head internally. And so think about that. There's value in listening to some of these affirmations if this is new to you. There are a lot of meditation tapes out there that just go through affirmations, and I'm telling you, it changes the way that you think during the day if you fill your mind with some of that, especially first thing in the morning, but anytime during the day. An affirmation is a declaration that something is true, I'm sorry, and it's making a commitment to yourself. But that affirmation only becomes reality when you follow it up with action. So you have to hear the voice saying that in your head, and then you have to act accordingly. And if you will follow that pattern, then those affirmations, again, those roads get deeper and more traveled through with our actions combined with our thoughts. And pretty soon your brain believes what you're telling it. Affirmations always start with I. It's something that I have control over. We're taking away victim mentality. I can do this. I have power to do this. And then again, that repetition of thoughts followed by actions makes it a reality. Some different ways you can replace negative affirmations with positive ones here. But I really liked this last one too. I give myself permission to ask for solace and comfort. I can ask other people for help when I need help with this. As we're talking about this accountability by putting I in the driver's seat, we also need to say, I am capable of and humble enough to ask for support and help when needed. Okay. We're going to breeze through this one because it's pretty self-explanatory, but please remember, again, what we always say here, you're the average of the people you spend the most time with. So be around the people as much as you can that help you think and talk and act more positively. Think about the influences you can eliminate from your life. If you're feeling, I promise you, if you are feeling like you are stuck in negative thought cycles, try eliminating media for a little bit. Social media, news, politics, just give it a couple of days even and see if it changes what's happening in your brain. I have been amazed at the difference that has made when I have put that to the test. So act wisely there because it makes a big difference here. Okay, we've already talked a little bit about mindfulness. The positives of mindfulness is you learn to be in the present moment, which is what all of us really want to be doing, but most of us are pretty bad at, or we're usually thinking about what's already happened or what's going to happen. But also mindfulness helps break cycles of repetitive thoughts. Remember how we talked about 95% of the thoughts that we have are repetitive? These mindfulness activities help us break those cycles so we can start to think new thoughts. I love that idea. And if 95% of our thoughts are repetitive and we're trying to change those, this is powerful. Practicing gratitude. It sounds cliche because it works. It's so important to learn to look around and see what you're grateful for in moments when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling frustrated with yourself. I saw a sign the other day, which this sounds silly not silly, but it sounds a little bit contradictory for a weight loss practice to be preaching this, but I really believe it's true. This sign that I saw the other day said, your life is not revolving around weight loss and lifestyle changes. And I think that that's true. This is an important piece to a better lifestyle, but there is more to your life right now, even right now, when you're working so hard at this, than these things that you're trying to change. And it's important to remember that and find joy in the things all around you and not wait until your life is different, not wait until you've lost the weight to enjoy those things and to be happy. So focus on what you're grateful for. Focus on solutions. Let's ditch victim mentality. Man, that is something we all struggle with, I know. But there is power in learning to not be a victim of your situation anymore. There's power in having the confidence and recognizing the reality that you are in control of your own destiny. And then we stop wasting our time on pity parties and adult temper tantrums. And trust me, I've done both. But what a waste of energy and creativity and imagination. Now, it's easy to say that, right? Oh man, what a waste. I want to be done with that forever. It's a whole new thing entirely to actually get out of those patterns and those mindsets. And that is a life skill. So if you're going to build it, it's going to be swimming upstream while you build it. But man, how powerful to get to the other side of that and just say, you know what, I don't need those pity parties anymore. I can drive my own solutions. Journaling. And I would add therapy to this. This is the way that we kind of dig into what's going on. This is what I did with the I am enough statements, right? Just write things down, try to really dig into what's going on. Dig into your own fears, your insecurities, your frustrations. That can be really empowering. However, I would add this caution. I think both of these kind of talk therapies, getting it out on paper, getting it out is so important. And I'm not minimizing their value or their importance at all. But we can also get stuck there, right? We can also get stuck in these cycles of looking inward and focusing on the problems and focusing on, just staring those fears and insecurities and frustrations in the face is essential if they are to create aha moments that propel us forward and not leave us stuck in these cycles of negativity. So kind of know yourself and watch what's going on there. I mean, I know let's put therapy aside for a minute, and therapy is important because you've got trained professionals that know how to help you get out of these cycles, right? But even talking to a friend, have you ever been really frustrated with a family member or with another friend, and you go talk to a friend and you just vent and you get it all out and you get done and you think, I actually am more angry about this than when I started. I don't actually feel any better. And so getting in these negative cycles of venting and talking about it over and over and again, that only helps if it helps you move out of that place and doesn't get you stuck there. So think through that. Let's not underestimate the power of chemicals in our brain. And the best way to activate those feel-good chemicals is to move your body. So if you're feeling stuck in cycles of negativity, and it doesn't have to be running a marathon, get out and walk in the sunshine. Our challenge this month is all about getting more sunshine, right? And I can tell you that my mental health is at its peak when I am taking time to get out and move in the fresh air as much as possible. It definitely, it's not just something that's nice to do. It changes your brain chemistry to do those things. And so start small if it feels overwhelming, but make it happen. Learning something new, stretching your mind and your brain can help you gain confidence and feel more positive about yourself, and also make you really believe that you can overcome hard things. If you do something hard, you're going to believe that you can do more hard things, right? And the hard things don't have to be miserable. They can be something that's exciting for you to learn about and fun for you to do. And this doesn't even have to be about weight loss and lifestyle, but it can just expand your mind and your confidence. Plus, it makes life a lot more fulfilling and fun when you're learning to do new things, especially with people you care about. And as we wrap up tonight, this is, we actually have, a couple more, but this is one of the last ones. And this one's probably the hardest for me, but it's so wise to think about sometimes recognizing that you don't have to fix it right away. As you're making changes, it's going to a lot of times be a step forward, a step backward. And, there's going to be back and forth. There's going to be waves that hit and then waves of calm. And a lot of times we want our journey to be linear. And I don't know of any change in life that is ever linear. We're always, going back and forth and up and down, and gradually we're making progress. My dad used to call it a spiral, right? You're going up and then down and up and then down, but slowly the spiral is moving upwards. And so you are making progress even when those downward turns don't feel like progress. This is what we talked about on the last slide, but I love the way this is worded. Let the thoughts come, sit with it, feel it, and then give it a positive ending. So acknowledge them. Being positive and reframing doesn't mean that you're not acknowledging the insecurities or the fears that you're having. Let them come, sit with it, and then help your brain to reframe those into positive end solutions. Even if that's eventually this will get better. Eventually I will overcome this, right? I also really like this idea of laughing and dismissing ridiculous thoughts. One thing that my dad was really good at growing up is laughing at me. And I know that sounds insensitive. He had the perfect blend of sympathy and empathy. He was so kind and always acknowledged when I was in pain in a very kind and empathetic way. Oh gosh, that's tough. But also, if I was scared about something silly, I knew I could go to him and verbalize it. And he wasn't ever mean about it, but he would laugh with me. Oh, you don't need to worry about that. And it would always make me laugh. And it was such a relief. And it's funny because now my husband does the same thing for me. And that's very healing and helpful for me, is I will go to him and I'll say, I'm having this crazy thought, and he'll laugh. And then I'll laugh and I'll be like, thanks, that actually really helped me feel better about that. It's really bad when I go to him for a laugh and he says, oh man, that is scary. And I'm like, no, you can't be scared by that. You need to tell me it's ridiculous, But laughing things off is really helpful, and it helps us get out of those distorted thinking patterns, and really just learn to let things go and to move forward. Just know that you can let things be sometimes and not have to fix everything as you're learning this process of reframing positive thinking, embracing failure, being okay with failing. One of an entrepreneur that I follow, just because her writing is so good, she said once, if you don't fail once a day, you haven't pushed your limits. So get excited to fail. And it's true, right? Anytime you're going to learn something new, you're going to fail at it. That's just part of the process. You're not human if you're not failing. And so if you're not failing, it just means you're stuck in your comfort zone. And so embracing this idea that failure leads to growth, that's powerful, powerful stuff. And it's another great way to reframe our thought processes to empower us. And then to close up here, just be compassionate to yourself. Forgive yourself every time you make a mistake. Don't justify. Don't, because justifying gets us stuck too, right? Oh, well, I had to do that because of this. No, just say, I made a mistake and it's okay because I'm failing, because I'm growing. Um, and I'm going to try again. I'm going to get up and try again. And then treat yourself, right? Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself the way that you would. Again, I think about the way I try to take care of my children when they're sick or when they're struggling, the way that I try to nurture them and do things that will comfort and help them to feel loved. So how do we do that? I know that a lot of times in my life, people have said, just practice self-care. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. What does that even look like? And so I did some research on this about what other people do for self-care. And here's some great ideas if you're stuck like I was for a long time. Um, do something relaxing, any kind of physical relaxation, bubble baths, cuddling up with a blanket and a book, um, time, in a place that's relaxing. Go for a walk in your favorite place, get some extra sleep. One of the things that I did as an approach this summer is I refused to set an alarm clock. For the first 2 months of the summer, I said, I'm going to sleep until my body is done sleeping. And, at first it was like sometimes 9 or 10 hours a night, and I would wake up when I would wake up. And gradually, I was waking up again between 5 and 6 in the morning and going out and taking a walk and feeling great. But it took my body a while to get to a point where it was ready for that again. And I just let myself listen to my body and say, I will sleep as much as I need to. And sometimes that's the best self-care that you can give it, especially if you're recovering from something difficult. Special events that feed your soul, that's different for every person. Maybe it's a rodeo, maybe it's a concert, maybe it's a bookstore, maybe it's a girls' night or a guys' night out with friends. And then making time to work on a hobby or something that's fulfilling for you. Spending time with people who fill your cup, or spending time alone to regroup, whichever one of those sounds more fulfilling to you. And there's no right or wrong there, right? Blowing off steam physically can be hugely beneficial for self-care. Going for a run, going for a walk, participating in a sporting event, going for a walk, going dancing. And then, yes, even going off plan sometimes. Enjoy a special dinner or a treat that you wouldn't eat every day. Sometimes just giving yourself permission to let go of your goals for a second to regroup and then get right back on it. That can be self-care, and that's important. So as we close up tonight, one more thought: self-care versus self-sabotage. Think for a second about what your automatic response is when you feel stressed. What behavior do you turn to? Is it eating? Is it, it can be any number of things, right? Is it binge watching TV? What is it that you automatically turn to when you feel stressed? And then think about, does it actually alleviate your stress, or does it long-term contribute to your stress? And as we close up tonight, I want you to take a few minutes after this webinar is over and think about the answers to these questions. Can you think of any behaviors or habits or coping strategies that actually contribute to your sense of well-being and your mental health and your physical health? Do you have those in place? And part of the journey here is that most of us don't, right? Most of us by nature are turning to these self-sabotaging behaviors. But if you don't have a coping strategy that contributes to your well-being long-term, not just the credit card short-term withdrawal, right? Cookies can contribute to your well-being and for that 10 minutes that you're eating them. But what is actually going to support your goals that can also relieve your stress? Again, when we think about self-sabotage, we're thinking about, for our thoughts, we're looking at negativity, hopelessness, worst case scenario thinking, pity parties, adult temper tantrums. And then the behaviors, we talk about punishing ourselves, but that can go to both extremes, right? Maybe we punish ourselves by quitting or giving up. Oh, I just can't do this anymore. I'm just going to, and this is where we quit and go eat a whole bag of Oreos, right? Or like, I'm quitting my diet, I'm giving up, I'm just going to self-sabotage that way. Or sometimes we do it to the opposite extreme. We punish by overcompensating, and then we burn ourselves out. Have you ever done that? Oh man, I ate all those Oreos, so now I'm going to go run 10 miles because I should be punished for that, and I got to work it off, right? And it's not usually that clear cut either. So pay attention to the ways that this is manifesting for you. I know that my husband and I have gotten pretty good at pointing it out in each other when we're not always good at seeing in ourselves that you're punishing yourself and you don't need to, right? So think about what that looks like for you. And one last final thought, please remember this: physical health and mental health, they're one and the same. When mental health suffers, physical health usually follows. When physical health suffers, mental health often follows. But the good news is that that's true in the reverse too, right? When your mental health improves, your physical health will often improve. And when your physical health improves, your mental health will often improve too. We mentioned this in another webinar, but primary care doctors are now saying that 80% of the sick visits that they're seeing are stress related. We know that there are a lot of known physical conditions with real physical symptoms and real physical pain that don't have anything showing up on lab reports, on CT scans, on any of that. And it's so frustrating for patients. But the College of Lifestyle Medicine will tell you that the reason for that is that our mental health and our physical health are so tied together that if our mental is struggling, we will feel and experience real physical pain and real physical symptoms as a result of that. So if that's discouraging to you, again, please remember the reverse. As we take these steps to improve our mental well-being, and these are steps that you can take, they're attainable for any one of us. And while maybe it'll be a journey to get to where you want to be, these are steps you can start taking today and see real change. You will see benefits in your physical health as well. If you're having trouble feeling stuck in these cycles where your mental health is bringing down your physical health, which is bringing down your mental health, and it's just hard to break that cycle, that's why you have us. That's why you're working with a physician and a team of registered nurses, because we have the ability to help you in whatever capacity. If we need medication short term, we can do that. If we need therapy, we can get you connected with the right people. We can help you break those cycles and get to a place where you are happy and at peace with the way that your body and your brain are working together to help you achieve lasting, healthy results. So remember, the future is bright. We will be here every step of the way to see you to that future. And I'm so excited to have had you here with me tonight. Thank you for all of the comments. We have a whole month of this ahead. So excited to spend this whole month talking about how we take care of our own thought processes and our brains to optimize our success in reaching our goals. So I'll see you next week, everybody. Thanks for joining me tonight. Have a great night. See you later.